is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. A political showdown vote in the U.S. House of Representatives today on economics. A vote to support President Bush's idea to cut the capital gains tax for the wealthy. 64 Democrats bucked their own new House leaders, abandoned them, and joined with Republicans to support the measure. Mr. Bush says that cutting the capital gains tax for the wealthy will boost the economy and create jobs. Opponents don't believe that, and they call it simply a tax giveaway for the wealthy. Correspondent Bob Schieffer reports now on the politics of income and today's political outcome.
I'll be taxing you always, not just for this day, not just for a year, but I'll be taxing you always.
Before it was over, the Republicans were not only paraphrasing Irving Berlin, the Democrats were telling each other to be guided by feelings of the heart.
Stand up for what you think in your heart and your mind you know is right for your country and your future. This is the chance for the right vision for America. Let's stand up for it.
The gentleman's time has expired.
But heavy arm twisting wasn't enough. Sunbelt Democrats joined with the Republicans, and by a substantial margin, they cut the tax rate on capital gains, the profits from business investments such as stocks and real estate. It was a smashing political victory for the president, and it provided a rare, unscripted Washington moment. When the president called to congratulate the Republican point man Bill Archer, he didn't realize Archer was on a speakerphone.
I tell you, I'm displeased with Gephardt, the way he made it so really kind of perfect.
Mr. President, I must tell you that I'm in the press gallery right now with a whole lot of reporters, so I think you should be alerted to that fact.
But just so they can hear you and not me.
Well, I'm afraid they're hearing you too.
But the brief embarrassment was soon swept away by Republican jubilation.
To have 64 discerning Democrats to come join us on this issue is a really good benchmark for us now as we go through the balance of this session.
In a way, that was the real significance of what happened today. Whether the capital gains tax cut ever becomes law is still uncertain because there is powerful opposition in the Senate. But this was the president's first showdown with the new House leadership. He beat them, and that could set the tone for a lot of battles down the road. Bob Schieffer, CBS News at the Capitol.
A whole new dimension today to the investigation of mismanagement, corruption, and crime at HUD. Now comes word of massive losses in the federal home loan insurance program. Terrence Smith reports how this could cost you billions of dollars.
This luxury Chicago apartment building, complete with marina, may not look like federally subsidized housing, but it is. So is this complex with its health club. Both are currently in default, to the tune of more than $100 million in taxpayer funds advanced by the Federal Housing Administration. They are examples of losses incurred last year by the FHA that a new General Accounting Office study says have reached astronomical proportions.
FHA's fiscal year 1988 financial statements show that FHA lost $4.2 billion and that the government's equity has sunk to a deficit of $2.9 billion.
What went wrong? The auditors blame a combination of bad loans, mismanaged mortgage companies, foreclosures in the hard-pressed oil and gas country, and outright fraud. The FHA loss for 1 year alone is almost equivalent to the money the government spent this year on its much-heralded war on drugs. It equals the combined budgets of Congress and the Commerce Department, but it's only a fraction of the total bill.
Well, with today's revelations, the loss to the taxpayer in the HUD scandal is $6.9 billion. As much as we spend on all of subsidized housing for the poor.
The new audit prompted a pledge of reform from the current housing secretary.
Auditing practices of the past 10 years have been terrible, and we're moving to correct that. We're shutting down the programs that have cost the insurance fund a lot of money.
But the piper must still be paid for the losses already accrued. Congress will have to provide some $4 billion over the next few years to replenish the FHA and keep it on a sound footing. Terrence Smith, CBS News, Washington.
The Food and Drug Administration announced today it will allow hundreds of AIDS patients to take an experimental drug known as DDI. This is in keeping with the new government policy to make promising anti-AIDS drugs available in the early stages of testing. CBS News medical correspondent Susan Spencer has our report.
Bowing to relentless pressure from AIDS groups, the government has agreed to allow wide-scale use of an experimental new drug before there is conclusive evidence that it even works, and before FDA approval. But dideoxyinazine, DDI for short, has created much excitement among researchers who see it as a promising alternative to AZT.
A decision like this shows that there is a little more empathy in Washington for the plight of people with AIDS.
The new 3-track distribution plan includes scientific trials in which DDI will be tested against AZT, a testing program by manufacturer Bristol Myers open to the many AIDS patients who can't tolerate AZT, and distribution by doctors to patients in advanced stages of AIDS, this on a compassionate use basis. This kind of system is exactly what AIDS activists have been fighting for literally for years. It opens the door for release of other AIDS drugs in the testing pipeline. Thousands are expected to apply for DDI. Doctors worry that expectations may be too high.
DDI is not a cure for AIDS. It is another drug, another option, and we will learn what its role is.
Researchers warn, too, that DDI is a highly toxic drug, one that has been tested in relatively few people. At high doses, the drug has been shown to have serious side effects, among them severe pain and pancreatic problems.
We really have to be careful to remind people that this is a drug that needs to be treated with respect.
A year of treatment with AZT currently costs over $6,000. Bristol Myers says it will distribute DDI for free, at least for now, but the company won't speculate on how much its drug will cost if it is ultimately approved. Susan Spencer, CBS News, Washington.
And still to come on the CBS Evening News, John Sheehan on China's return to its darker past. And Richard Threlkeld on a teacher who brightens the future. Former Philippine dictator Ferdinand Marcos died this morning in Hawaii. Marcos was 72. He'd been hospitalized for 10 months with kidney, lung, and heart diseases. Marcos's family wants to bring his body back to the Philippines for burial, but in Manila, President Corazon Aquino said today she will not allow it. She said that to do so would threaten the, and I quote, tranquility of the state. The United States government backed her up. The FAA said no aircraft would be allowed to transport the remains. Marcos ruled the Philippines for 2 stormy decades until he was overthrown by a popular revolt. He died in exile under U.S. indictment, accused of looting and squandering his own country's wealth. Bob Fall reports.
He ruled for 20 years and became a symbol of corruption and greed. Even in disgrace, arriving at his exile in Hawaii, Marcos brought along over $7 million in diamonds, rubies, and emeralds. While 70% of Filipinos lived at or below the poverty line, while his once prosperous nation was becoming an economic basket case, Marcos was secretly lining his own pockets, siphoning off an estimated $5 billion from the Philippine Treasury. In the beginning, he was different. Filipinos and Americans saw him as a war hero, a guerrilla fighter against the Japanese. Elected president in 1965, the brilliant lawyer was a kind of Filipino JFK, a reformer who cut crime and brought about order. But power changed the man. 7 years later, barred from a 3rd term, Marcos declared martial law. But slowly, the economy Marcos and his cronies had been looting collapsed. And in 1983, when opposition leader Benigno Aquino was gunned down point blank in an assassination widely believed to have been carried out by Marcos loyalists, Marcos' legitimacy collapsed as well. An inflamed country rallied behind Aquino's widow, Cory. Ultimately, her so-called people power prevailed over Marcos' fabled combination of guns, goons, and gold. Bitter at the U.S. for what he called his shabby treatment, and later indicted for racketeering and obstruction of justice, Marcos plotted his comeback. But by then, even his war record had been exposed as phony, and his claims to greatness seemed as hollow as the monument he left behind. Bob Fall, CBS News, New York.
President Bush praised Marcos in 1981 for, quote, adherence to democratic principles. Mr. Bush said today he was saddened by Marcos's death. The president met at the White House during the day with Colombia's embattled president, Virgilio Barco. Barco praised the U.S. for its help in his campaign against Colombia's drug thugs. He is also looking for trade concessions on coffee and other exports to help the battered Colombian economy. Chinese communist leaders handed out medals to nearly 3,000 citizens today in Beijing, hailing them as model workers. It was the first ceremony of its kind in 30 years, the party propaganda machine reviving a relic of the Mao Zedong area in its battle against the now underground movement for democracy. Of course, the party, the Communist Party, is not just relying on rewards to keep itself in power. 4 months after the massacre in Tiananmen Square, a brutal crackdown is still underway as the Communists prepare to mark the 40th anniversary of Mao's revolution. Correspondent John Sheehan reports from inside China, setting back the clock.
The prisoner about to be sentenced to death was led in with chains around his ankles. The penalty has already been decided by the state, and there is no defense. He is a man without hope. Humiliated before a crowd of thousands in a Beijing gymnasium, his head held down in an attitude of shame and not permitted to speak, Wu Ke-chang, assistant manager of a leather goods factory, was charged with embezzlement. Show trials like this are frequent in China, but they are rarely shown on television. This one was broadcast live on state-run TV because the government wanted to demonstrate that it is fighting corruption, one of the rallying cries of pro-democracy students at Tiananmen Square. Since the massacre of protesters last June, the pace of executions has increased. The prosecutor shouts in indignation, "Wu Ke-chang, guilty as charged. Take him out and shoot him." The spectators applaud. He was executed in the usual way, a pistol shot in the back of the head, immediately after the spectacle in the gymnasium. By custom, his family will receive a bill, 13 cents for the cost of the bullet. This is justice Chinese style. The accused has no rights. Appeals are futile. Amnesty International calls the summary executions judicial murder and says that since the suppression of the pro-democracy movement, many executions have been carried out in secret.
This is a government that's out of control. It does not have respect for its people, and it has contempt for human rights protections.
Tiananmen Square remains guarded by armed soldiers for fear that some citizen might try to place a few flowers or a poster in remembrance of the victims. China's leaders have returned to the tried and proven tactic of the 50s and 60s, control through intimidation. Prominent dissidents simply disappear. Ren Wanding wrote essays about freedom. His wife says that one night he was taken away and hasn't been heard from since. Student leader Wang Dan is said to have been severely beaten after his arrest. Typically, families are given no information about detainees. Just as the government denied that there was a massacre, it now denies the reign of terror.
There is no such thing as political persecution in China. And therefore, there is no such thing, accordingly, as political prisoners.
Chinese today live in constant fear of the knock on the door in the middle of the night. Hotel guests are roused from their beds and questioned in their underwear.
They're picking up people by the thousands. They're killing secretly. They're killing legally. They're using torture in their jails. They pick up people on a weekend, they beat them, put them out on the street on Monday morning. This is a government that is hell-bent on human rights abuses, and the world has to know that, and we've got to stop them.
On TV, a few of the convicted were released without punishment, treated mercifully, the government said, because they had turned themselves in and confessed their crimes. But Shen Xiaoping, purchasing agent of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, was arrested for stealing. This calls for a severe penalty, said the prosecutor, after a trial that satisfies no international standard. 3 accomplices were sent to prison. Shen Xiaoping, like more than 30,000 other Chinese in the last 6 years, was sentenced to be shot. John Sheehan, CBS News, Beijing.
Braniff Airlines made an emergency landing today in bankruptcy court. Its second trip there in 7 years. The cash-short carrier asked for protection from its creditors while it tries to reorganize as a smaller airline. Braniff laid off about 2,800 workers today and drastically reduced service. That left hundreds of passengers scrambling for seats on other airlines. Congress approved more than $1 billion in emergency aid today to help the Carolinas, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands recover from Hurricane Hugo. And the White House announced that President Bush will tour South Carolina tomorrow. This follows a storm of protests that the president and his aides have been slow in delivering desperately needed help. Hurricane Hugo left tens of thousands of people homeless, but as Aaron Hayes reports, man was not the only victim.
On the South Carolina coast, there is damage to wildlife. On a sandbar once home to thousands of pelicans and heron, only a few hundred remain today. Fledglings are now left on their own.
I just wanted to check and see if I could find a dead woodpecker, and there's nothing in there.
In the Francis Marion National Forest, biologists search for an endangered woodpecker. A week ago, this was home to the world's healthiest population. Not anymore.
We haven't had a major hurricane that's affected endangered species habitat in 50 or 60 years to the extent that this hurricane has affected endangered species.
The damage, say biologists, is more severe because there are so few places left for these animals to live. For the tiny red-cockaded woodpecker here, there are hundreds fewer places now. The remaining birds seem confused, searching for their broken nests.
After a while, you can only, you just have to go ahead and try to look at the future instead of the past.
Over Bull Island, wildlife officers hunt for a rare red wolf and his 4 cubs. Red wolves were reintroduced in the southeast to keep from becoming extinct. Bull Island was the perfect place till the hurricane hit. Today, though, radio trackers located them.
If the wolves are out there, then, you know, that tells us something. The animal's very, very resilient and very, very tough and can survive.
It's believed much of it will come back, but slowly. For pine forests, where more than 2 million trees were lost, 50 years. For pelicans, 20. For the woodpecker, a human lifetime. It's something people here hit by the hurricane may not notice for a while. They have other priorities. But in years to come, they'll find, sadly, their loss from Hugo included a serious setback for Mother Nature. Aaron Hayes, CBS News, Bull Island, South Carolina.
End of the two-day gathering in Charlottesville, Virginia, where President Bush and the nation's governors got together to talk about ideas for improving education in America. The meeting concluded with a statement of general goals for trying to improve public education, few specifics, and, as expected, no commitment for any major increase in federal resources for education. One feature of this education conference, no educators were invited, no teachers. CBS News correspondent Richard Threlkell looks tonight at the view from the classroom, how one person can make a difference, how one good teacher can make a big difference.
A few blocks from where the president and the governors have been agonizing over American education, Susan Brooks is hard at work educating the 6th grade at the Walker Elementary School, just as she's done every school day since her first class of 6th graders 20 years ago.
I am now teaching the children of those students here.
Okay, so we want it clear and smooth.
She works 70 hours a week at it. It's the only job she's ever had or ever wanted.
I learn so much from the kids. The way that children express themselves is so exciting.
Pushing myself over rock after rock. Each plunge or step felt like 10.
This is English class, but truth is, she's teaching these children something much more in this classroom she calls her village.
Was that your first mountain you ever climbed? No, I climbed a lot more.
What I would want them to think is, you're really important. And when you're in my community, your presence and everything you do in your life matters to me. I would like to think that something I gave you is going to last.
The first book report that you're doing is fiction, but if you thought about some of the nonfiction...
Spend some time in this classroom or any other,
Not too loud, though. Go!
and you'll see that there's more to making better schools than just more money or books or computers.
That was excellent.
It takes caring.
Ready, begin.
Ask the kids at the Model Central Park East School in New York's Harlem. They're veterans of some other schools where nobody cared. And they know why all those inner-city school dropouts drop out.
At their schools, they're really nobody. They're just a number. And it's easy for them to fall through the cracks.
I think they get frustrated because they don't understand the work and teachers won't have the time to explain it to them. So they'll be like, why should I even try? And just throw the book to the side.
Tell me what a fact is.
You can prove them.
That's right.
It takes compassion, too. Ask Susan Brooks.
I worry. I worry about the children that don't have regular meals. I worry about the children that I know don't sleep well and they start falling asleep in the class. I worry about the ones that are really bright. Are they being challenged enough?
And it takes time for teaching. Too often our teachers are bogged down in red tape.
Let teachers teach.
Yeah, give me time to teach. Don't interrupt, don't take it away. I'm just real happy that you could come, and I'm sorry that we don't have a whole room full, but...
Time for togetherness, parent and child. Susan Brooks asks parents to spend at least 20 minutes a night with their kids, helping with their homework, being there, and to spend some time with her now and then.
You're going to be coming here soon? Pretty soon?
I hope so.
I hope so, too.
Okay, nice meeting you.
Thanks a whole lot.
Her message to parents is simple and crucial.
We need you more than we need the bigger budget and the mandates and somebody else's idea of change. We need them. And between the child, the teacher, and the parent, I can't think of a stronger school.
The goals of this education summit will require a big sacrifice in time, money, and effort from Americans in and out of school. But then what's at stake for all of America's school children is the rest of their lives. Richard Threlkeld, CBS News, Charlottesville, Virginia.
And that's part of our world tonight. We hope you'll stay tuned now for 48 hours. Tonight, the program's on the plight of the nation's elderly. That's tonight at 8, 7 Central Time. Dan Rather reporting for the CBS Evening News. See you again soon in 48 hours.
Ready? Go! Good. That was excellent. And you were straight all the way through that. That was great. Hey. That's it. That was very good.
That's good. Let's go around the room now and see what we get.
Older Americans, neglected and worse.
I hit my mother.
The tarnished years. What will the next 48 hours be like tonight?
This is CBS.